Joining me now, the nation's top law enforcement officer, Attorney General Loretta Lynch. Welcome to Fox News Sunday.
Good morning, Chris.
Why isn't the wife of the Orlando shooter in jail? We know that she went on some of these scouting trips with Omar Mateen. She knew that he bought guns and that he was planning an attack. Why not charge her?
Well, where we are now is in the middle of a very aggressive investigation. And yes, we are talking to everyone who had contact with this killer. And that, of course, includes the family members. We want to know what they know, what they saw, what he said to them. The investigation is ongoing. We don't have any announcements to make about other individuals at this time, but we are trying to recreate the days, the weeks, the months of this killer's life before this attack. And we're also asking people who had contact with him to come forward and give us that information as well.
Now, I know that you are going to Orlando yourself on Tuesday and that tomorrow the government will release transcripts of all contacts between the FBI and Mateen when he was on the terror watch list. Any sense at this point that the government made a mistake when it first put him on and then took him off the terror watch list?
Well, I am going to Orlando on Tuesday, and I'll be meeting with the team on the ground as well as the victims and first responders, and meeting with this brave community, this LGBT community, the Latino community that was targeted in this terrible act of hate and terror. What we are releasing tomorrow are actually the transcripts of the phone contact between the killer and the Orlando negotiators the night of the attack. So it will be a partial transcript of those calls. We're trying to get information out. It's our goal to be as transparent as possible in this investigation. With respect to the prior contact that we had with him, we're going back and looking at that as well. We're going to go back and look at everything we did in connection with him and be as transparent as possible about how it evolved, what developed, and what changes we could have made.
The Senate is set to vote on Monday on some gun control measures. Under a Republican plan, if someone who's on a terror watch list wants to buy a gun, the government would have 3 days. The sale would be halted. The government would have 3 days to prove probable cause to a judge. Why isn't that reasonable?
Well, what we've been looking at is the plan that currently would give the Department of Justice two very important tools. First, the ability to, in fact, stop a sale if someone is on the watch list. But second, and more importantly, if there is litigation about that, because of course people would have the right to challenge that. It does cover a constitutional right. It gives us the ability to set procedures in place that let us protect sensitive and classified information in the adjudication of an appeal. Those two issues are very, very important to us, and that's why we're supporting the amendment that contains those two important issues.
What about the 72-hour deadline, that you have to prove probable cause in 72 hours or the gun sale goes through?
Well, what we think is more appropriate is the one that gives us the most flexibility, the ability to stop that sale at the beginning, and the ability, again, if it's challenged, to protect sensitive and classified information. Those are the concerns that law enforcement has had some time now about how to manage this very, very difficult and important issue.
But you know what the critics say. They say that that means if you maximum flexibility, the government will take weeks or months. The terror watch list has 800,000 names on it, and you know that some of the names are on there mistakenly. If you're going to take away someone's constitutional right, don't you have to give them due process, and don't you have to give them prompt due process?
Well, you have to give them both, and we feel that the amendment that gives us those two important tools lets us do that. In addition to providing due process, as you noted, whenever a constitutional right is implicated, that has to be built into it. We have a very strong law enforcement interest in protecting the types of investigations that in fact put people on the watch list or that may be around those individuals. And so it's very important to us that we have the ability to conduct this in a way that lets us protect that information.
But is 72 hours too short a time?
Well, we think that having the maximum flexibility is the best way to achieve that. It lets us determine whether or not the sale should proceed. First of all, we may be able to look at a person and make a determination even faster than that, or we may not. We may, in fact, need more time. And I think the American people deserve us to take the greatest amount of time and scrutiny that we can in the important decision of whether or not someone who's been implicated in this matter should, in fact, be able to buy a firearm. But of course, there has to be redress. There has to be a way for people to challenge it, and we do want that. But we also, in the course of that, need to be able to protect sensitive and classified information.
On Monday, the day after the attack, Donald Trump said this.
When I'm elected, I will suspend immigration from areas of the world where there is a proven history of terrorism against the United States, Europe, or our allies, until we fully understand how to end these threats.
The next day, you said this: we have to push back on the voices that prey on fear and that sow division. Attorney General Lynch, were you talking about Donald Trump?
I was not talking about Mr. Trump or any specific person, but I was talking about the climate of fear that comes about after these terrorist attacks that often leads people to react without thinking and to react in fear, and sadly allows them to take the law into their own hands and try, in fact, and go out and target other individuals. I was talking about that climate that we've seen after so many of these attacks.
Do you think that Donald Trump contributes to that climate?
You know, I don't have a comment on Mr. Trump or any of the candidates. I think we have to keep our eye on the larger picture here, which is the victims of this crime were from a community that is often marginalized, and that frankly the LGBT community is more often the victims of hate crimes than any other recognized group. That comes from a wide variety of sources. We have to push back against those voices that are speaking out now that are not supportive of that community, and we have to make sure that this country stays open and free and inclusive for everyone.
But I guess the question is this to be viewed, and not to say it's one or the other, as primarily a hate crime or as a terror attack? Also this week, the CIA director, John Brennan, said that ISIS is now focused on launching terror attacks outside the Middle East. Here he is.
The group is probably exploring a variety of means for infiltrating operatives into the West, including in refugee flows, smuggling routes, and legitimate methods of travel.
Given that, is it unreasonable for Donald Trump to say, stop, at least temporarily, ban refugees from coming into this country?
Well, let me go to your first point, which is, what are we talking about when we talk about this terrible attack in Orlando? And as the president has said, it is both an act of terror and an act of hate. Clearly, this is an individual who was inspired by terrorist ideology, but it was an attack that was directed against the LGBT community and the Latino community. We are trying to find out his motivations. We're trying to find out everything we can about what led him to this path, what put him in that nightclub that morning with that firearm. Now, one of the things that we have talked about before is our concern about homegrown extremists, individuals who consume this radical, violent ideology and then act on it. And of course, what we're working on is making sure that our investigations pick up those individuals and also gather as much information as we can from people who know them, from citizens who are concerned about them, so that we can, in fact, intervene before this kind of tragedy happens again.
I want to talk about one other subject with you. President Obama recently endorsed Hillary Clinton for president. Take a look.
I'm with her. I am fired up, and I cannot wait to get out there and campaign for Hillary.
Now, you're a political appointee of the president. Does that create a conflict of interest for you? Does it make it harder for you to handle the criminal investigation into Clinton when your boss is saying he thinks she should be president?
Well, you know, I don't get involved in whom the president endorses, and I don't have comments, as I said before, on any of the candidates. The investigation into the State Department email matter is going to be handled like any other matter. We've got career agents and lawyers looking at that. They will follow the facts and follow the evidence wherever it leads and come to a conclusion.
So does this create a conflict of interest for you?
No, this is not a conflict for me or for the department or for anyone. We will continue to do all of our work in the same way in which we always have, with the interests of the American people first and foremost.
Now, the same day that Clinton was endorsed by the president, you met with the president at the White House. Did you in any way, shape, or form discuss the Clinton case with the president?
We've never discussed the Clinton case. I've never spoken about it with the president or really with anyone at the White House. That's not the kind of relationship that I have with people there, and it would be inappropriate to do so.
Attorney General Lynch, thank you. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Chris.
Pleasure to talk with you. Please come back.
Thank you.